How this great fat lie has become a big fat truth, joyously announces the Daily Mail. Remainers scorned the claim Brexit would give an extra £350 million a week to the NHS. In fact, it's now getting an extra £710 million. It's another desperate attempt by the Mail to persuade its readers that NHS funding rises prove Brexit's most notorious slogan was not only right, but that the NHS is getting even more money than promised. In fact, the article claims the NHS is getting another £710 million a week compared with 2016, so Brexit for the NHS has been a stonking success. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch goes even further. Hang on to your seats for this next bit. They said Brexit wouldn't lead to the NHS getting any more funding, and certainly not £350 million every week. But we have used our Brexit dividend to get the NHS more than £1 billion more every single week than it had before Brexit. Well, imagine the shock for both the Mail and the Business Secretary when someone tells them that health spending always grows, and the NHS budget would have grown by even more than normal because of COVID. And average real terms growth in health funding is actually far lower right now than it was under the Blair and Brown governments. And they'll fall off their chairs when they find out the increase in the NHS budget since we left the European Union has absolutely nothing to do with Brexit and everything to do with higher taxes, borrowing and squeezing other departments. In fact, despite making a manifesto pledge in 2019 not to hike taxes, the Conservative government's latest measures put the UK on course to have the biggest tax-raising parliament in modern history. Does that sound like there is now billions of pounds of extra money available to spend on the NHS every year? In fact, 4 years on from leaving the European Union, there's absolutely no sign of that promised Brexit dividend. So there's absolutely no evidence that the higher spending on the NHS is because of Brexit. And even Larry the Cat now knows that any savings on monies previously sent to the EU have been more than cancelled out by the economic hit of the hard Brexit the government has inflicted on the country. Don't just take my word for this.
The Centre for Economic Reform claims the government has lost out on £40 billion in taxes because of the damage done to the country's output by leaving the European Union.
By almost every economic and financial measure, the hard Brexit, which has been entirely self-inflicted on the UK economy by this insane government, has been disastrous for the UK. The loss of GDP due to Brexit and exiting the EU single market is put conservatively by the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility at a staggering 4% of GDP by 2030. There's barely an importer or exporter who says that trading with the European Union has got easier. So for the Business Secretary to suggest the NHS has been handed an extra £1 billion a week from a Brexit dividend is not only complete insanity, it insults the intelligence of the public that are paying for it through a hike in their taxes. And let's not forget spending on the NHS has barely kept pace with a growing and ageing population. NHS waiting lists in England have hit a record high, and thousands are now dying every year waiting for treatment. Does all that sound like Brexit has been a success for the NHS?